Welcome to my session again. In the last chapter, we created a GraphQL type for order info and order details. In this chapter, we will write a query to fetch this information. Like in Entity Framework Controller, what we have done, we have created a service, iOrder service, and these two method we have called. Now, similarly, we have to call this method using the GraphQL query. Okay, so let's create a one class. I say order query. Now here also we need to inherit this object graph type. Here I will write a query field. So in the fields I have orders. So this query I will use as a query input, and I will need a argument. Okay, we need to pass some argument. But what is this field type? What it will return? Okay, so here also this graph type we need to return, and what type, which is a order info. Okay, and this we need to write in constructor. This order info. So why this is error again? As I said previously, we need to use type GraphQL type. So order info is mapped to this order type. So we need to pass this. We have a order info type. Now that's correct. We can see arguments, new query arguments, new query argument. Okay. So here for fetching all the order information, we just need to pass the user ID, and user ID we need to fetch from the user. So what is this new argument? I need to say the name is user ID, and what is the type of this is int graph type. Okay, so we should use here it will be the equal to sign, and it is a int graph type and not int, because here we are talking about everything about the GraphQL type and not a C# type. So what I'm saying that this is my field. I'm expecting this as a return type. I will say my query will have a orders label in which I will pass the argument the user ID, and using the user ID I will fetch all the order information of that user. Now we need to resolve the context of it. So we will create. Now we need to return something. What it says, not all code path returns a value. So we need to return what we need to return. We need to return this data. I will say return. Now what? So we need to inject our service, my order service here, and I will say order service get all orders. Now here we need to pass a user ID, but here we don't have any variables for the user ID. So what we will do, we will read this data from the context. Okay, so what I will say, context, give me the data. Okay, so I will say context get argument. Okay, now we need to resolve this by using GraphQL, and I will say just return me my user ID. Okay, now when I'm saying just return me my user ID, here we need to pass C# type. Okay, because here we are accepting from the user interface or from the user query, so it needs to map with the our GraphQL type. Now we have a integer GraphQL type of user ID. So C sharp is knowing that my GraphQL type is an integer, so I need to convert that GraphQL type user ID into the C sharp user type. That is why we have to specify integer here, int. Similarly, I will copy this. We have another order. Now in the next, I will say just order. Here my expectation is not list, because I will get a order by order ID or order number. Here we to pass two arguments. This is simple, order number. Here I will say it is not an integer, it is a string graph type. Here I will say get order by ID. Two arguments we need to pass. We have order number, and here we say string. So this is how a GraphQL type works in the query. So in this chapter, what we have done, we have created one query. Basically, we have created two queries. One will give all the order information, another will give us single order information. This is how to pass the arguments from the GraphQL query. This line will fetch the user ID from the GraphQL. Okay, and it will read by this method context.get argument, and it will return all the data of that particular user ID. Similarly, here we have done for the user ID and order number for a single order. So in the next chapter, we will talk about how we can write a schema, and we have to modify startup class because of we are using the GraphQL. We need to configure GraphQL in the startup class. Okay.